rather an indivisible extension of the universal human rights framework. However, the non-binding nature of existing instruments limit their effectiveness in ensuring accountability and preventing violations. In this context, we express our support for the proposal put forth by our partners, the Union Association for Human Rights of the UAE, to launch its Unified Arab Declaration on Principles and Digital Human Rights as a regional guiding framework aimed at bridging normative gaps. We further support the initiation of a gradual international process within the United Nations systems toward the development of a specialized convention on the protection of human rights in the digital space. We call for an inclusive and multi-stakeholder dialogue to ensure that digital transformation advances human dignity, equality, and sustainable development. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the Agence Suisse pour le Développement and les Droits de l'Homme. Mr. Vice President, in the framework of the report from the High Commissioner's Office, our organization would like to draw attention to a growing phenomenon. That is to say, the cross-border mechanisms targeting certain states, including the UAE, by way of official media platforms financed by the state or with a direct oversight. This goes beyond legitimate criticism, including open calls to undermine the legitimacy of sovereign organizations, influencing as well political stability for media campaigns. This trend gives rise to serious concerns over Article 2.7 of the UN Charter, as well as the principles established according to which human rights should not be used as a means of domination or political interference. The use of human rights speech as a cover undermines the stability of the states concerned and undermines the credibility of the international human rights systems. It weakens the confidence in these mechanisms. We call for the High Commissioner's Office to include the issue of media incitation against states in its next report, evaluating the incidences, the impact on sovereignty, stability, and the effective enjoyment of human rights, drafting clear norms regarding responsibility when official media or quasi-official media is involved in cross-border incitation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. With that last speech, we have concluded our discussion on Agenda Item 2. We will continue now with statements in enjoyment of the right to reply for Agenda Item 2. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan. You have 3 minutes.
No ha pedido.
There is no request for the floor then. Okay, we will continue. We will continue with Tanzania.
Excuse me, but we had not requested a right of reply. Thank you, nevertheless.
Gracias por esa.
Thank you for that clarification. There was a mistake in the recording system then. Thank you for your clarification. For a right to reply, I give the floor at this time to the distinguished representative of Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The United Republic of Tanzania wishes to exercise its right of reply in response to the statements delivered by the representatives of Belgium, Norway, the United Kingdom, European Union, Sweden, Switzerland, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International concerning the events related to the recent general elections in the United Republic of Tanzania. We firmly reject the selective and unsubstantiated nature of those interventions, which misleadingly described some events while omitting reference to individuals and groups who openly called for the disruption of the electoral process. Because of the serious omissions of these statements, the United Republic of Tanzania is compelled to remind partners that on 29th of October 2025, Tanzania experienced unprecedented acts of violence in some parts of the country, targeting police stations, local government offices, public transport, private homes, and businesses. Even citizens exercising their right to vote were also attacked. These were not isolated incidents, but organized efforts to undermine constitutional order. Mr. Vice President, democracy requires both the protection of rights and respect for the rule of law. Acts intended to obstruct lawful elections cannot be equated with legitimate political participation. The absence of clear condemnation of such violence is not only alarming, but inconsistent with constructive dialogue. As a sovereign state, Tanzania bears the primary responsibility to preserve public order, safeguard its constitutional framework, and protect its citizens. Upholding the integrity of the electoral process is not optional. It is a constitutional duty. Measures taken to prevent violence and maintain stability must therefore be understood within the legitimate exercise of state responsibility. To reinforce transparency and accountability, Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan established, in accordance with the law, an independent commission of inquiry composed of competent persons of international repute to investigate incidents arising in the context of the elections. Contrary to some unfounded assumptions, the commissions operate independently with clear mandate to establish facts and recommend appropriate measures. We appreciate the comments of the High Commissioner for Human Rights regarding the ongoing work of the Commission. Following a brief extension, the Commission is scheduled to present its findings on the 3rd of April 2026. These findings are expected to inform subsequent reconciliation initiatives as well as the forthcoming constitutional and institutional reforms. We remain confident that Tanzania will emerge from this process stronger and more united, reaffirming that violence has no place in our political culture. We urge our partners to
Muchas
respect
gracias.
the independence of...
Thank you very much. Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Tanzania.
Oh, perdón, de Irán.
Pardon me, the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My delegation is exercising this right of reply to respond to some concerns and allegations and also to register our strong criticism on others. The Islamic Republic of Iran condemns in the strongest terms not only the grave violation of international law arising from the recent aggressions by the US and Israeli regimes, but also the troubling silence and inaction of certain states in the face of these unlawful attacks cause serious violation of human rights. The prohibition of the use of force under Article 2 of the UN Charter is not a selective obligation. It is a peremptory norm of international law binding upon all the states. In a situation that fundamental principle is openly breached, the targeted country will have no choice but to exercise its inherent right to self.
Thank you very much. With that last speech, we have concluded our discussion on agenda item 2. We will continue now with statements in enjoyment of the right to reply for agenda item 2. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan. You have 3 minutes.
No ha pedido.
There is no request for the floor then. Okay, we will continue. We will continue with Tanzania.
Excuse me, but we had not requested a right of reply. Thank you, nevertheless.
Gracias por esa.
Thank you for that clarification. There was a mistake in the recording system then. Thank you for your clarification. For a right to reply, I give the floor at this time to the distinguished representative of Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The United Republic of Tanzania wishes to exercise its right of reply in response to the statements delivered by the representatives of Belgium, Norway, the United Kingdom, European Union, Sweden, Switzerland, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International concerning the events related to the recent general elections in the United Republic of Tanzania. We firmly reject the selective and unsubstantiated nature of those interventions, which misleadingly described some events while omitting reference to individuals and groups who openly called for the disruption of the electoral process. Because of the serious omissions of these statements, the United Republic of Tanzania is compelled to remind partners that on 29th of October 2025, Tanzania experienced unprecedented acts of violence in some parts of the country, targeting police stations, local government offices, public transport, private homes and businesses. Even citizens exercising their right to vote were also attacked. These were not isolated incidents, but organized efforts to undermine constitutional order. Mr. Vice President, democracy requires both the protection of rights and respect for the rule of law. Acts intended to obstruct lawful elections cannot be equated with legitimate political participation. The absence of clear condemnation of such violence is not only alarming, but inconsistent with constructive dialogue. As a sovereign state, Tanzania bears the primary responsibility to preserve public order, safeguard its constitutional framework, and protect its citizens. Upholding the integrity of the electoral process is not optional. It is a constitutional duty. Measures taken to prevent violence and maintain stability must therefore be understood within the legitimate exercise of state responsibility. To reinforce transparency and accountability, Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan established, in accordance with the law, an independent commission of inquiry composed of competent persons of international repute to investigate incidents arising in the context of the elections. Contrary to some unfounded assumptions, the commissions operate independently with clear mandate to establish facts and recommend appropriate measures. We appreciate the comments of the High Commissioner for Human Rights regarding the ongoing work of the Commission. Following a brief extension, the Commission is scheduled to present its findings on the 3rd of April 2026. These findings are expected to inform subsequent reconciliation initiatives as well as the forthcoming constitutional and institutional reforms. We remain confident that Tanzania will emerge from this process stronger and more united, reaffirming that violence has no place in our political culture. We urge our partners to
Muchas
respect
gracias.
the independence of...
Thank you very much. Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Tanzania.
Perdón, de Irán.
Pardon me, the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My delegation is exercising this right of reply to respond to some concerns and allegations and also to register our strong criticism on others. The Islamic Republic of Iran condemns in the strongest terms not only the grave violation of international law arising from the recent aggressions by the US and Israeli regimes, but also the troubling silence and inaction of certain states in the face of these unlawful attacks cause serious violation of human rights. The prohibition of the use of force under Article 2 of the UN Charter is not a selective obligation. It is a peremptory norm of international law binding upon all the states. In a situation that fundamental principle is openly breached, the targeted country will have no choice but to exercise its inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the Charter. The deafening silence in the face of war crimes and acts of aggression, along with the widespread violation of human rights through massacre of innocent civilians and attack to hospitals, is appalling. During the previous years, hundreds of civilian people have been martyred. Only in one attack in Minab, 182 innocent girls are massacred by the US and Israel. How can self-proclaimers of human rights witness the massacre of nearly 200 little angels while they were studying, yet turned a blind eye to it and failed to condemn it? Selective condemnation, double standards, and political expediency undermine the universality of human rights. This Council and the broader international community must reaffirm that international law applies equally to all. Accountability must not be contingent upon political considerations. And finally, Mr. Vice President, a message addressed to our friendly and neighboring countries. We have never attacked and will never attack in the territory of our friendly and brotherly Islamic countries. Iran is aware of your position, but this war was imposed on Iran and was not a decision made by Iran. Iran cannot be subjected to attacks and be expected to remain silent and not respond to those attacks. What we are doing is solely the exercise of our legitimate right to self-defense by targeting bases and personnel that are directly involved in the aggression against us. Iran's armed forces have been instructed to exercise sufficient caution in selecting targets in countries of the region, and that no attack can be carried out without thorough assessment. We did not create the current situation, and full responsibility for the present circumstances rests with the US and Israeli regime, who have dragged the region to this unjustified and unnecessary war. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Turkey.
Mr. Vice President, we deem it necessary to bring to the attention of the delegates once again the provocative and unfounded allegations regarding the Cyprus issue, which we totally reject. We would like to reiterate once again that the only occupation in Cyprus is the occupation of the government of the once partnership Republic of Cyprus by Greek Cypriot side through force of arms. The years between 1963 and 1974 were the darkest days in the history of the Turkish Cypriot people. When the Greek Cypriot side hijacked the now defunct Republic of Cyprus back in 1963 by force of arms, the Turkish Cypriot people were subjected to atrocities and massacres perpetrated by the Greek Cypriot militia between 1963 and 74. In 1974, when Greece and its collaborator, Greek Cypriots, made a final attempt in the wake of a coup d'etat for the total extermination of the Turkish Cypriot people in the island and to annex the island to Greece through enosis, Turkey's timely intervention in the island, in accordance with her rights and obligations under the 1960 Treaty of Guarantee, saved the lives of Turkish Cypriots. The Turkish peace operation also saved the lives of the Greek Cypriots in 1974. However, the Turkish Cypriot people are still being denied their rightful representation and participation in meetings, activities, and events held by international organizations, including here, in this very relevant forum of the United Nations, which has been assigned to promote and protect the human rights of all the peoples in the world. The unjust isolation imposed on the Turkish Cypriot people by the Greek Cypriot side in every aspect of their daily lives, such as right to representation, travel abroad, communications, trade and tourism, all cultural and sporting relations with other countries for more than 60 years, still continue today. In the light of these realities, the international community is expected to lift the unjust and illegal restrictions imposed on the Turkish Cypriot people without further delay and to reaffirm their sovereign equality and equal international status to enable them to take their rightful place in the international fora. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. Vice President, the UK, France, Australia, and some other countries, along with certain anti-China NGOs, have abused the forum of HRC to continuously fabricate and disseminate false information, smearing and discrediting China, which China strongly opposes and firmly rejects. Currently, Xinjiang and Xizang enjoy economic growth and social stability. The rights of people of all ethnic groups, including freedom of religion and freedom to use and develop their own spoken and written languages, are fully guaranteed. Since the implementation of the NSL and the Safeguarding National Security Ordinance, social stability has been restored in Hong Kong, and its residents' lawful rights have been effectively protected. Hong Kong affairs are purely China's internal affairs and brook no external interference. China has repeatedly stated its stern position on the so-called Xinjiang Assessment Report. The report lacks legitimate mandate, the consent of the country concerned, and factual basis, rendering it entirely illegal and invalid. The 51st session of HRC resolutely voted down on the draft resolution on Xinjiang. Numerous countries have supported China on issues concerning Xinjiang, Xizang, and Hong Kong through various means at the Council, fully demonstrating the prevailing views of the international community. The so-called forced labor allegation has been fabricated by certain groups out of ideological prejudice in an attempt to contain China's development and is completely unsubstantiated. Ethnic minority workers seeking employment outside their home regions do so of their own free will and based on enterprises' recruitment needs. There's no such thing as forced labor transfers. Some countries persistently fabricate lies and rumors to attack and smear China, yet remain silent about their own serious human rights violations. They ignore deep-rooted problems at home, such as racism, anti-immigrant hostility, rampant drug abuse, thereby allowing their citizens' human rights and dignity to be trampled upon. Yet under the guise of human rights, they arbitrarily single out other countries for criticism, apply double standards, foment conflict and confrontation, and wantonly interfere in other countries' internal affairs, infringing upon the human rights of countless people in developing countries and jeopardizing the credibility of the UN human rights mechanisms. China urges these countries to take a hard look at themselves, take concrete actions to uphold the very purpose of the HRC, and contribute to the sound development of the international human rights cause. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore.
Mr. Vice President, my delegation takes the floor in response to the statement by Switzerland directed at my country in relation to the use of capital punishment. We recall that the UN General Assembly, in establishing this council 20 years ago, explicitly emphasized that the work of this council should be, and I quote, guided by the principles of universality, impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity. With this in mind, it is regrettable that Switzerland has chosen to selectively criticize Singapore and has continually sought to impose their own views and values on others. Such selectivity and non-impartiality undermines the spirit of constructive dialogue that should guide the work of this Council. It is undisputed that capital punishment is not prohibited under international law. There remains diverse opinions and practices around the world regarding its use. At a time when the UN human rights system requires collective support, such selective approaches only weaken the credibility of this Council. Singapore remains committed to dialogue based on mutual respect for sovereignty and genuine cooperation, and we urge the Swiss delegation to do the same. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Cuba. President, we do not recognize any delegation to lecture another country on human rights. We have seen Lithuanian violations of human rights documented, including discrimination against women. They recently expressed their deep concern over the ongoing gender violence in Lithuania. This continues to be highly underreported and normalized. We are also concerned over the meaningful restrictions to the access to sexual and reproductive health in that country. The Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights has also noted increased discrimination against national minorities and the Romani community, which continues to face exclusion in employment, housing, health, and education. In the country, serious structural inequalities persist, including gender wage gap. In the 21st century, women in Lithuania make 12% less than men. This gap is even higher in key sectors such as healthcare. Human rights mechanisms in the United Nations have expressed serious concern over the multiple reports of massive expulsions of refugees and asylum seekers, a lack of asylum procedures, and deficient conditions in retention centers. These practices have left many, including children and other vulnerable groups, without an access to food, water, housing, and legal assistance. President, if Lithuania was truly concerned over the human rights in Cuba, they would have spoken up against the actions taken against Cubans by the United States. There would be at least one mention of the cruel energy blockade imposed on us with the goal of bringing a humanitarian catastrophe. But the delegation of Lithuania has not said one single thing over these criminal and illegal actions that flagrantly violate the human rights of the Cuban people. While in Geneva, the delegation of Lithuania continues to show apparent concern over human rights in other areas such as Cuba, they defend the criminal blockade against Cuba. Such hypocrisy. Instead of seeking to give other countries lections that no one asked for, the representatives of that country should resolve the growing and serious human rights violations in their own country. I conclude by emphasizing that Cuba does not interfere in the domestic affairs of any country, nor do we seek to give lessons to anyone. However, we will not be silent in the face of this double standard and hypocrisy. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Burkina Faso.
My delegation exercises its right of reply following the statements made by the delegations of Switzerland and Australia concerning Burkina Faso. My delegation would like to note that the measures taken are a part of an exceptional security environment with terrorist attacks and the priority of preserving public order, national security and territorial integrity. The suppression of political parties is a part of a new model of participation and political representation which is in step with the aspirations of the people and our socio-cultural realities. Burkina Faso remains deeply committed to the protection of human rights, including the right to life. The context of fighting terrorism, however, requires legislative measures that have been adopted, such as regarding the death penalty. We are fully aware of the issues related to preserving civic space, given the serious security issues we are going through, and there are clear legal foundations for civil space. And these allow greater financial transparency for such civil society organizations, preventing them from being used in offensive ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Mr. Vice President, the DPRK delegation would like to exercise its right of reply to the statements delivered by France, which we categorically reject. The Western countries, including France, are raising so-called human rights issues in our country that do not exist. They are not concerned about the human rights. Their purpose is to smear our image and interfere in our internal affairs. The DPRK is making continuous efforts to improve the lives of our people. They are already enjoying real and tangible benefits from these efforts. We know very well what we need to do. France should focus on addressing its own grave human rights violations, including police brutality against the peaceful protesters and racial discrimination, rather than presumptuously pointing fingers at others. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Rwanda.
Monsieur le Vice-Président.
Vice President, Rwanda is taking the floor to reiterate the recorded facts in the Great Lakes region and the responsibility of the DRC in the security crisis on its territory. In the east of the DRC, the security crisis has been continuing for more than 3 decades, and still today more than 160 armed groups continue to be active there, principally in the eastern provinces. Such a crisis indicates internal and structural issues. AFC M23 is a Congolese movement made up of Congolese citizens born from political and security claims from within the country. It meets a political and institutional need, and it falls under the remit of the Congolese authorities. Instability, however, is not limited by the borders with Rwanda. Violence and security tensions impact a number of neighboring countries, including close to the capital of Kinshasa, illustrating the structural and security challenges for the governance. The persistent presence response of the FDLR is a clear factor that has been documented as undermining regional stability. The FDLR is mainly made up of former members of the Rwanda Armed Forces and the Interahamwe militia, responsible for the genocide against the Tutsis of 1994, just a few decades ago. They have faced a Security Council armed embargo and sanctions. However, they are supported by the DRC government and have been included in the Congolese armed forces in violation of the pertinent resolutions of the Security Council. Neutralizing the FDLR is the primary responsibility of the DRC, and they have recognized that responsibility in the process of African Union mediation and in the Washington Accords. The stability of the Great Lakes region requires an honest analysis of the deep causes of the conflict and the full exercise of national responsibilities. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Azerbaijan.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, my delegation wishes to exercise its right of reply in response to the statement made by the delegation of Armenia. Azerbaijan has taken decisive steps to investigate and prosecute atrocity crimes. Last month, the national courts rendered judgments in a number of criminal cases stemming from the past conflict, whereby Azerbaijan exercised not only its right, but also its duty under international law to investigate and prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity. Azerbaijan's legitimate right and obligation under international law to prosecute and hold accountable individuals responsible for international crimes committed on its territory were also affirmed by the opinion of the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention issued in February last year. The judgments are fair and proportionate to the gravity of crimes committed. Armenia in this regard should acknowledge and respect the judgments rendered to those individuals. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Thailand.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. It is with deep regret that Thailand has to take the floor to respond to the remarks made by Cambodia. Cambodia has continued to use disinformation and accusations to portray Thailand as an aggressor through unsubstantiated claims to amplify nationalist sentiment, resentment, and antagonism. The allegation of occupation and military operations is gravely unfounded. Under the ceasefire reached in December last year, both sides agreed to maintain existing troop deployments in their position at the time of the ceasefire, pending further dialogue under established bilateral mechanisms. Thailand places the safety and well-being of civilians above all considerations. We do not engage in pillage or unlawful appropriation and conduct all actions in accordance with international law. Stabilization measures, including the use of barbed wire, are intended to prevent renewed confrontation and ensure safety of people. Tensions arose after years of encroachment and repeated provocations. The communities referred to by Cambodia are in the Thai territories that we provided as temporary shelters for Cambodians fleeing conflict in the 1980s. After the conflict ended, many remained and gradually expanded settlements into Thai territory. Despite Thailand's continuous protest, no corrective action was taken. Instead, the Cambodian military has encouraged civilians to engage in encroachment and activities that heighten tensions. Moreover, throughout the conflict, Cambodia conducted unprovoked and indiscriminate armed attacks against Thailand, resulting in civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure, including hospitals. Such actions constituted a serious violation of Thailand's sovereignty and territorial integrity and a clear violation of the UN Charter, international human rights, and humanitarian law. While exercising the utmost restraint, Thailand was compelled to exercise its right to self-defense to protect our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the safety of our people. The defensive measures undertaken by Thailand are strictly limited in scope and proportionate to the threats faced. Lastly, we affirm our commitment to the ceasefire agreement and peaceful resolution. Thailand wishes to move beyond this conflict and sincerely hopes that Cambodia will demonstrate the same good faith. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Indonesia wishes to exercise its right of reply to the statement delivered by an NGO during the general debate under item 2 this afternoon. Indonesia remains firmly committed to the international human rights framework. We have ratified 8 out of the 9 core international human rights instruments, and more recently we have reformed our criminal code and criminal procedural law to strengthen legal certainty within the criminal justice system. These reforms enhance due process guarantees, reinforce judicial oversight, and aim to prevent arbitrary conduct throughout investigation and detention processes. Our commitment to implementing international human rights instrument is reflected in and guides our legislative processes. In this spirit, we would like to offer several clarifications as part of a constructive and open dialogue. First, our human rights commitments guide our deliberations on all legislations, including laws related to the role of the military. These discussions involve consultation throughout the process to ensure accountability and also inclusivity between relevant stakeholders. The proposal of legislation itself serves to strengthen oversight and accountability mechanisms by defining clear criteria, limits, and thresholds for participations by the military. Second, Indonesia values the role of a human rights defender and civil society as essential components of our vibrant democracy. The freedoms of expression, opinion, and peaceful assembly are guaranteed by our constitutions. However, as with all rights, their exercise is subject to limitation as provided for under our constitutions and national law. In this regard, the determinations of whether a particular act constitutes a criminal offense rest within the competence of an independent judicial system. Any assumptions regarding the outcome of judicial proceedings prior to a final court decisions will be premature and unfounded. So to conclude, Mr. Vice President, Indonesia remains committed to the promotions and protection of human rights. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Tunisia.
Thank you, Vice President. We wish to express our right of reply to an intervention by Amnesty International and the falsifications it provided. We wish to provide, therefore, the following clarifications. We are keen to preserve human rights and freedoms as per our constitution and law and international commitments. Tunisia has undertaken reforms in 2021 to consolidate democracy and the rule of law in line with the aspiration of our people, which aims accountability, reform, and combating corruption. Tunisia is keen to reform the judiciary so that it conduct its mandate in achieving justice and protecting rights of people while achieving equality and non-politicization and neutrality. The 10 years before 2021 saw the judiciary being compromised by certain parties affecting the interest of the country and the people, where a party of the judiciary was unable to achieve justice. Therefore, reform of judiciary was a priority for our state. Judicial prosecution is done according to the law and with respect of human rights and the right to defense and all other legal guarantees. This is done on the basis of the commission of crimes related to public interest. These have nothing to do with human rights, freedom of expression for the people involved, because all people are equal in front of the law, and therefore they enjoy their rights. And as equally, they are subjected to interrogation before the law. The freedom of expression and peaceful assembly is guaranteed by the Constitution and in line of our international commitments. Vice President, Tunisia time and again expressed its support for human rights, freedoms, and cooperation with special procedures of the Human Rights Council. We, one of few countries which received over the last years various visits by various human rights mandate holders. We also submit our regular reports to the UN Human Rights Treaty bodies on a regular basis. We urge all parties to respect the will of the Tunisians and their aspirations for justice and reform, and we call for respect for its sovereignty and to refrain from intervening in its domestic affairs or in its judiciary. And thank you, Vice President.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Greece exercises its right of reply to the statement made by the delegation of Turkey. We categorically reject all claims and accusations made by Turkey. For more than 15 years now, since the 1974 Turkish invasion, Turkey continues to illegally occupy approximately 37% of the territory of the Republic of Cyprus, a UN and EU member state, thus violating the most fundamental rules and principles of international law, as well as the 1960 Treaty of Guarantee. The ongoing Turkish occupation is a daily violation of the human rights and fundamental freedoms of the people of Cyprus, including, first and foremost, the displaced Greek Cypriots, the missing persons and their families, as well as the remaining enclaved persons. Moreover, the so-called unjust isolation of the Turkish Cypriot community is also a direct result of Turkey's ongoing occupation. The only way to end human rights violations in Cyprus is equally well known. It is the end of the Turkish occupation and the commitment to result-oriented negotiations in the UN framework, as determined by the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, towards a mutually acceptable, just and viable solution to the Cyprus issue. Tangible progress in the ongoing intensive dialogue under the UN Secretary-General depends not only on the Turkish Cypriots to engage in the UN process, but also on whether Turkey will allow a substantial negotiation, abandoning unacceptable positions outside the UN parameters. Greece remains fully committed to supporting the UNSG-led efforts and calls upon Turkey to commit itself to finding a solution to the Cyprus issue on the basis of this framework for the benefit of all Cypriots. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. The distinguished representative of Turkey has requested a second right of reply. You have 2 minutes.
Mr. Vice President, we would like to exercise our second right of reply. Once again, we categorically reject all the baseless allegations against Turkey. The legality of the Turkish intervention of 1974 has been underlined by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in its resolution 573, which was adopted in 1974. Furthermore, the Athens Court of Appeal, in its decision of 21st of March 1979, the decision number is 2658/79, underlined that, in quotes, the Turkish military intervention in Cyprus, which was carried out in accordance with the Zurich and London agreements, was legal. Turkey, as one of the guarantor powers, had the right to fulfill her obligations. The real culprits are the Greek officers who engineered and staged a coup and prepared the conditions for this intervention. Moreover, it is very important to recall the dramatic statement made before the Security Council on 19th of July 1974 by Archbishop Makarios, the Greek Cypriot leader at that time, in which he openly accused Greece, not Turkey, of invading and occupying Cyprus. I would like to remind that, lastly, the presence of the Turkish peace forces prevents the recurrence of the violence on the island, and I would like to recall that none of the UN Security Council resolutions on Cyprus have ever referred to the legitimate and rightful Turkish intervention as invasion or subsequent presence of the Turkish troop to deter further Greek Cypriot atrocities on the island as occupation. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Is there any other delegation that wishes to exercise their right to reply? I do not see any. We will now have a brief break, and then we will meet again in just a few short minutes to address agenda item 3, addressing the report from the Special Rapporteur on torture and other forms of inhumane and degrading treatment. Thank you, and punishment.